Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And the topic of this 10-minute moan is a story about a Scottish guy who's a transgender woman who was travelling South America when the Supreme Court hearing was come into play and is now seeking asylum in Argentina. This is bonkers. And in this story, I found out some things about Argentina that I didn't already know. For example, they have a law that says that 1% of their public employees must be trans. I wonder how that goes, because here the figure for trans is reportedly about half of 1%. So does that mean we just need people to pretend they're trans? And the laws that they've got in Argentina are absolutely bonkers as well, because they have adopted a similar system that the SNP tried to put into Scotland, which was you could identify as anything without any medical certificate or any psychological report. So it would appear that in Argentina, if the figures are slightly different to ours, they're slightly similar to ours, where it's about half of 1%. But 1% of the public office jobs must be trans. Then you would just fill out a piece of paper and say, my name's Claire, right? Claire Houston. You would then double the chances of getting a job in Argentina. And it sounds a bit potty to me, despite them having one of the furthest right leaders in the whole of the world at the point. So this story that the Record ran, I think it was late last night, the headline was Scots trans women to seek asylum in Argentina after Supreme Court ruling. Sorry, it was earlier this morning, it was a Sunday Mail exclusive. A Scottish transgender woman is to seek asylum in Argentina over fears of persecution and discrimination in Scotland. Glasgow-born Jen Bell's decision comes in the wake of a Supreme Court ruling last month, which said, in law, the term woman refers to biological sex. The ruling has sparked a raft of new rules and guidelines banning trans people from certain toilets, sports and clubs, which have been welcomed by some gender-critical groups. Jen, 31, was travelling in South America when the Supreme Court ruling was announced and now plans to claim asylum in Buenos Aires. Speaking exclusively to the Sunday Mail, Jen said, initially, I just wanted to travel for a bit and I'd always wanted to go to Latin America. I ended up in Buenos Aires and then all this happened with the Supreme Court. I'm looking at my options, but I do have the option to apply for asylum. I've been talking to various LGBT groups here to judge whether that's feasible, and they seem to think that I would have a case. They watch what's happening in the Supreme Court hearing, the cast review, and now these rulings banning trans people from all sorts of things. All sorts of what things? Women's toilets and sports? I'm still seeking advice on it, but that's what I'm intending to do. Jan believes that life has become much harder for transgender people in Scotland in the last decade and said things are only going in one direction. I would call bollocks on that, because you're 31, right? The CAS report basically told us that children should not be given any surgeries, and the most biggest thing in that report was the, puberty blockers. That was for folk under 16. You're 31, so that doesn't include you, right? The only other thing that's happened since then is the Supreme Court hearing now means you can't pee in a women's toilet and you can't play women's football, basically. Oh, and you can't go to a women-only rape centre. How does that transform anybody's life? How does that make it dangerous? How can you possibly go to another country and say, my life's in danger in there because I can't pee in a women's toilet? The world has gone mad over this. A decade ago, I had the opportunity to medically transition. It was a process I went through. So if you've went through it, now that you, and you can still go through that, right? But let's just say you didn't, right? You couldn't go through it now. You've already claimed that you've already went through it. So how does that affect your life? Well, reality is you can still get medically transitioned. and you're already medically transitioned. So anybody giving you asylum on that basis doesn't know what they're talking about. People were given help and it was based on informed consent and self-determination. People are still given help and it is certainly based on informed self-determination, right? That process now just doesn't exist. What a lot of nonsense. It does exist. You can still transform. Is that the right word? What do you call it? Deceptibots. That process now just doesn't exist. Within half a decade, all of this has been taken away. It really alarms me how quickly rights have been degraded for trans people. It's just nuts. When you zoom out and you look at this, only going to go one direction, and life for people like me is just going to keep getting worse. He's now a fortune teller, right? I don't want to be worrying about whether I'm going to get beaten up, arrested or killed just for who I am. You listening to this nonsense? I've got some advice for these people, right? And not all of these people, by the way, because I see trans as two very, very clear and distinct different groups. Ones who just genuinely feel I'm in the wrong body and want to just go about their life with as little hassle as possible and go on with things, just like every other person in society, right? And others that want to make a big show about it and everybody's got to know they're trans. Now, I don't know anybody that's like me, non-trans, that wants to make a big show of being, I'm no trans. You just got on with your life. But there are a portion, and I'm not sure if it's the majority or the minority, but they're certainly very loud, of trans people that seem to spend every single minute, every single day, wanting to enlighten the world that they're trans. And I find that pretty bonkers, to be honest with you. And I've got advice for them at the end of this story, by the way. I don't want to be worrying if I'm going to get killed. My God. Buenos Aires, Argentina's capital, is known as the gay capital of South America and is considered one of the friendliest places for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. In 2012, the country passed a law that allowed transgender people to change their gender on official documents without the need for medical intervention such as surgery, hormone therapy or psychological assessment, which sounds awful like what the SNP crackpots in Scotland were trying to bring in until the British government said, no, you're not doing that, because that's evidently bonkers, right? Trans people are treated according to the gender they identify with, and the medical treatment for transitioning is included in the country's compulsory medical programme. In 2021, this is a belter, the country introduced a quota to have 1% of public sector jobs filled by trans people. Jen said the way she's viewed in Argentina is markedly different than in Scotland, despite the country being ruled by chainsaw-wielding right-wing Xavier Malay, whose nickname is the Madman, right? She said the issue's just not on people's radar like it is in Scotland. I walk down the street here and I'm just another woman walking down the street. That's such a weight off my shoulders. When I was in Scotland, I just constantly felt an edge. I used to work in retail and the kind of abuse I would get, I had people stalking me. Since the Supreme Court ruling, the Equality and Human Rights Commission issued an update guidance stating trans women could no longer use women's toilets and trans men couldn't use men's toilets. It also added that in some circumstances it is not permitted for trans women to use men's facilities. Oh, adverts just popped up. Charities asking for clarity on where they're supposed to go. Asked about the guidance, Jen said the answer is trans people are not meant to use public facilities at all. That's what it seems like. No. They're just not to use the ones of the opposite sex, Jen. These kind of guidelines are designed to be vague and confusing. No, they're quite simple. If you're a man, go to the man's bathroom. If you're a woman, go to the women's. There is nothing vague about that at all. How are they going to do that? Have someone to inspect people as they go into the toilet? Well, not really, because we've got laws against shoplifting, but we don't check everybody's bag as they come out of shop, right? We kind of leave it to people to be spotted or to be reported. That's kind of how it works, right? So no, there'll be nobody standing at doors saying, can I have a wee look down your trousers, please? And people that think that are barking mad. Since the ruling, pressure has grown on former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon to comment publicly, which she has so far refused to do. The Sunday Mail has made repeated attempts to contact Sturgeon, but interview requests have been declined. In 2017, she was in charge when the Gender Recognition Act was proposed to reform in Scotland, aligning it with countries such as Argentina, Ireland and Portugal. The move to legislate and make it easier for trans people to change their gender is seen by some as a catalyst for so-called culture war that has developed over the last 8 years. It's seen as gender critical and transgender supporting groups are at loggerheads, led to members of both groups being verbally and physically abused at rallies, ultimately ended in the Supreme Court. Jen said Sturgeon's silence was not surprising and said, it doesn't surprise me that Sturgeon is washing her hands of it. You look at the DNA of the SNP, they believe the party and country are one the same thing. Kind of agree with you, to be honest with you. As soon as the wind blows in a different direction, they drop it. And as soon as trans people become inconvenient to the survival of the SNP or to the Scotland becoming independent, they're going to show themselves by the wayside. I genuinely don't know what Sturgeon believes. Her whole career, she was a chameleon. So who knows if she actually does support trans people or if it was just part of the attempt to seem progressive. Now, this is something I've got a problem with, right? It's like these people see everything just totally one way. So unless you say, yeah, pee what you like, unless you say, yeah, give kids puberty blockers, unless you say, yeah, just let anybody. Staying up to date with events around the world can be difficult, where it's impossible to consult a single source for the full story. Narratives that shape public opinion often just reinforce media and corporate-backed vested interests. It's hard to know what information to trust. See what the media is exaggerating, sensationalising, over or under reporting. That's why I've been using Ground News. Ground News is an app and website that combines news from around the world in one place so you can compare coverage. For every news source, you can see if it has any political bias, how reliable the reporting is, and who owns them. They even have a blind spot feed that highlights news disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. Take a data-driven view on the news and stay current. Get news from thousands of sources worldwide in one place. I've been using Ground News to help me get all the world's news in one place and give a more balanced opinion on what we read and viewing who is telling us the truth and who isn't. Subscribe via my link to get 40% off the Vantage subscription. It's the one I use to get unlimited access to every feature. Your subscription can not only help my channel, but also help Ground News, as it makes the media landscape more transparent. Identify as male or female legally in a document by signing another document, right? Unless you say all this, then you do not support trans people. So you're either all in or all out. And that's kind of the way we are with most things in the UK just now, politically as well and socially. You can't be like, well, look, just go on with your life, just don't annoy the rest of us, which is kind of where I am. And do what you like as long as it doesn't affect the majority, which is where we were, right? But it's got to be, you're not a trans ally. Well, you don't need to be. You don't need to be a trans ally. You say, well, look, there are some trans people in the world, and obviously we've got some in the UK, so do they need some things to help them live their lives better? Now, if those things do not affect the majority of the other people, then crack on. Nobody's saying you can't identify as a woman. Nobody's saying that at all. What we are saying is you can't pee in women's toilets, you can't get into women's safe spaces like refuge centres and stuff, and you can't play in women's sports because you're not a woman. And the dead easy thing about this is, see, if you were a woman, why would you need the trans word in front of the word woman? By actually using that terminology, you're admitting you're not a woman. Because why you would just say, I'm a woman. But they don't. I'm a trans woman. So, kind of not, are you? But the other thing I would say is, if anybody's in Scotland does genuinely fear for their own safety and life, then do you know what? Go to Buenos Aires. If you want people to see this video, do 1, 2 or 3 of the following things. Hit the like button, hit the share and put some comments below. If you've not already done so, please subscribe to the channel. And if you want to, tick the notifications bell. You'll get an email and a notification from YouTube when I put new videos out. But the most important thing of all, unless you're some sort of crackpot that has a really warped opinion on what's actually going on in the world, nobody's trying to kill you. Nobody's trying to tell you to live like a man. All that's happening is they're saying, could you stay out of women's spaces, please, and stop trying to play football and rugby with them, right? So no you, but...
everyone else, have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.